So now that we've discussed the different kinds of funders, the different hoops you have to jump through for each one, we want to talk a little bit about how you prepare in engaging each one of those different types of funders individually. So, when engaging, whether it's a private, family, or government funder, what parts of your nonprofit mission do you usually start with? What do you highlight, and why do you do that? And when you engage a funder, how do you assess their priorities before contacting them? And what areas or priorities might you miss by using this strategy? And then finally, what steps can you take to ensure that your internal team is aligned and ready to respond to funder inquiries, whether it's your executive director or someone on the front lines? And Asia, I think I'll take the first swing at this. I
Sure.
always like to highlight the need statement. I think it's again, making sure that the message is appropriate for the different funders. So a family or private foundation, really getting local in terms of what is the need that you're serving in your community. And obviously, as you're moving up the chain with more national level funders or government, you want to make the case on what are some of the national trends, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's opioid use, whether it's some other socioeconomic statuses, and then bring that back to your individual community and talk to how the model that you are implementing in your program can help further that the solution to that problem, and whether it's sharing best practices, an innovative model, or just showing that you're making a great deal of impact and are worthy of that investment.
For sure. I love how you like to prioritize the need statement because a byproduct of that need statement is those success stories, right? Because for me, I always encourage nonprofits in their work to always center people when it comes to grant writing. Um, not only from the standpoint of what do people need, but also from the standpoint of leveraging your nonprofit in terms of what you have that where you're meeting that need. And so those success stories become super important because you also have to ensure that those success stories are connecting to your mission that's set in your nonprofit. And because we're dealing with humanity, right, and human life, it's super complex, it's super intersectional. And so if your nonprofit management isn't streamlined appropriately, there's aspects of that where you can go out of scope or it can become imbalanced in terms of what needs that you are meeting and making sure that you are on timeline for what you're trying to meet, which again is the language that you have to really ingrain within the culture of your nonprofit when you're going for those different types of levels of funding.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's really key. And I would also add that when you're reaching out, and of course we talk about looking at the priorities of the funders, making sure you're aligned. And the second question is just the challenge that we all work in the same ecosystem. Communities have many different needs, and you might be serving one or multiple, but a lot of nonprofits are helping address the symptoms of the overall epidemic of poverty, whether that's housing, whether that's food, whether that's education. And I think it's really important to, really be clear about what your organization is addressing, why it's important, but then how that also translates to other needs that people have in their lives. So, speaking from someone who's been at a food organization, emergency food provider, folks getting their food from a soup kitchen, from a pantry means that those dollars can go toward transportation. It can go
Right.
toward housing. It can go to, putting their kids in daycare, all the other needs that they have in an expensive state like New Jersey. So I really think it's important to kind of show the micro and the macro level impact. And I think that's a way to show that, look, we're checking off the box for this particular RFA, for this particular funding opportunity, but these dollars, this support is going to go a long way to helping address the other needs that folks have in this community and help make a more just, sustainable, and equitable community.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that even on this same notion of some priorities that you might miss in using the strategy that Anthony just laid out, it's super important for you to also be having those internal meetings with your nonprofit staff to ensure that the work that you're doing is matching what's going on with the community. Because when we think about things from a data standpoint, in my experience of doing analysis with focus groups for nonprofits as well as case studies, sometimes that data doesn't the data is going to be skewed, right? Because everyone's lived experience will be different, and when you are in a high level of need or a high level of survival, there is a likelihood that you may enhance or over exacerbate because you're looking to secure that need that you're looking for from the nonprofit. And so it's super important internally that you're also, again, taking a look at the data that you're getting from the community you're serving, while also making sure that the community itself, in terms of keeping those relationships with funders, whether that be community leaders, whether that be municipality officials, so that it matches and there's an alignment there as well.
100%. And I think when we think about what kind of staff on your team to leverage, it's really understanding the level of involvement with applications. So with a government application, you want your finance person involved to really
Right,
make sure you got it
definitely.
breaking down. You have the indirect cost right. But at all levels, you want to make sure that your programmatic staff are involved. So like you said, you're complementing some of these trends that we're seeing in like official surveys like the census, ACS, with what you're seeing on the ground and what those dynamics are. And we're going to talk about this a little further on in this course, but the importance of storytelling and adding that human element to what you're writing to, that, it's really those personal stories that captivate and really kind of, really hone in on what the importance is of your program at an individual level and can really help, put a nice bow on top of your application on its importance.
Absolutely. And I think as you also reflect during this section of the module, specifically to what steps can you take to ensure your internal team is aligned and ready to respond to funder inquiries, what comes to mind a lot for me right now is the galas. And that corporate social responsibility piece as well, because I think it's not just all about having a party and celebrating what's going right, at that moment in time with the organization or the folks that you're inviting, but because everyone is super busy and they're also engaging with multiple nonprofits, you do have to take the initiative to take the most advantage that you can of having those folks right there in the room with you if you are giving a gala or preparing for one. And so having those conversations right then and there about what are some things that get missed, right? As much as things are going well, take that opportunity to be honest, be transparent, and not leading with the ask, but more so, again, as Anthony mentioned in previous breakouts, leading with the advice to better enhance the program that you already have going as well. Because sometimes doing this line of work that's super forward facing with people, it's easy for us to go down that rabbit hole of being so negative or looking at the poor outcomes of things because that's what we're engaging with. But there's also a benefit to the work that's already being done where you want to improve, you want to enhance, you want to double down, and funders can read that energy. And so take advantage of doing that as well when we talk about the alignment and ready to respond to some of those funder inquiries.